Cops move my car without telling me. Move it to an illegal parking spot, a bus stop, where they then tow said car 2 hours later. What other blood-boiling moronic cop stories do you have? I was at LAX picking up my parents. There are cars everywhere, so it's stop and go. An airport cop waves me over to a spot and I go over. He tells me to turn the car off. As soon as I did it, he began writing me a ticket for parking in a loading zone. He told me to do it. Always point out to them the mistakes and try to argue with common sense. My buddy got stopped for DUI, although when the cops found him he was not in the vehicle and it was completely closed. They asked him to get in and park it in a real spot. He got in, started it, and was promptly told he was under arrest for DUI after doing what they only just told him to do. My car was parked on the street legally in the town my college inhabits, and my car got hit so hard by another car that the force drove it up partially on the curb. I go back to my car and there's a ticket for parking on the sidewalk on my windshield by the campus police. I pretty much tore that police station a new one. My mom and I were sitting at a busy intersection, waiting to turn left. In all 4 directions, there were double left turn lanes, a single straight lane, and a single right turn lane. We were in the rightmost left turn lane, just waiting. Blinker on. My mom remarked that there was a cop behind us, but neither of us thought much of it. The light turned green with the arrow, so we turned left. The cop behind us instantly flashed his lights and pulled us over. When he came up to the car, we were confused as heck. "You made an illegal turn," he said. "From the turn lane?" my mom asked. "That wasn't a turn lane. That was a straight lane. You were in the straight lane but turned left." Mom and I just looked at each other. That was a double left turn lane, just like in all the other directions. The cop got testy. "No, it was a single left turn lane. And you screwed up." I think he was starting to doubt himself a bit, though, as we kept staring at him with bewilderment and looking at each other. He ended up letting my mom off with a warning. I drove back to that intersection the next day, and of course, it was a double left turn in every direction. Not sure what burr was up the cops, but that day, at least he didn't write us a ticket. He let her off with a warning because he realized he was wrong but didn't want to admit it. My stepdad is diabetic, so me and my mom were somewhat trained to deal with diabetic emergencies. One night, he goes into hypoglycemia and isn't responsive. There's blood everywhere. Later on we found out he'd bit his tongue during the episode, and he's just generally seizing and scaring the crap out of us. Naturally, we called an ambulance. I had to stay home. My mom took the car and followed the ambulance. As she arrives at the hospital, she frantically tries to find a parking spot. She sees a cop and asks him if parking at the spot she's at is alright. The cop says no, it's a no parking zone. But since it's an emergency and she's just trailing the ambulance, she can park there and he'll take care of it. After the returns to the vehicle a few hours later, ticketed for a parking violation by the same cop who told her to park there. As for my stepdad, he got better. What an absolute dong move. My car was near a shooting. I wasn't allowed to move it because it was in the crime scene. So, I ended up with a parking ticket because it was a 2-hour parking spot. YTF did the parking authority ticket it while it was in a crime scene? I fought that one and won though. Parking authority are not the brightest crayons, nor the sharpest bulbs. My mother used to tell us a story of when she was a young teacher and had to drive somewhere. She parked her car on the side of the road and the local council came and built a bus stop around her car while she was doing whatever she'd gone into town for. When she got back she'd been given a fine. I never believed it, but I enjoyed hearing my mum talk of the bus stop conspiracy. After a night of hanging out playing video games in my parents' garage at the ripe age of 18, I decide to take about 7 of my friends home since I was the only one who could drive. It's about 3 AM. I am literally pulling my old Eurovan out of my own driveway when 2 squad cars charge up both sides of my street, block me in, and then 4 more cars, 2 for each side of the street, roll down and further block any traffic from entering the street. A cop walks up, casually demands to know where I live and what I'm doing out so late. I hand him my license, point to my house, and then gesture to the crowd of pea-stained teenage boys cowering in the back of my van. They had gotten a noise complaint about 2 hours back, staked out the site, Paraphrasing from what I remember of that conversation, one thing to point out was street cleaning had been that day, so the gutters were cleaned. The cop accuses of smoking marijuana and that he can tell because it has a sort of sweet smell. Let me tell you, Reddit, I hadn't started smoking pot yet, but when I did I tried to identify that sweet smell 9 years of medicinal marijuana later and I still haven't smelled anything sweet. The cop even went as far to say I am lying and picks up a burnt cigarette butt out of the gutter and threatens to have me charged with littering. This was what broke the camel's back. At once all the friends in the back start cracking up with loud laughter. My one straight edge friend wipes his tears away long enough to say, "Sir, you can do that but you'll lose." Shlomo Baggins here has never smoked a cigarette in his life. Red face, the cop walks away and we spend the next 15 minutes laughing our asses off at all the cops who tried to back out the street they'd so expertly blocked. I swear it looked like something out of a Benny Hill tape. We have a saying in San Clemente, California, it's illegal to be 1822 in San Clemente. Cops are so bored in that town it seems fitting. Side note, I found out the next day that cigarette butt had belonged to the one friend who walked home. He saw all the cops, tossed his butt and dived under a car and watched the whole thing scared shitless. Sounds like my town. Our cops have 4-wheelers just so they can bust kids for drinking in their backyards. Most backyards are about a square acre. It was my birthday and I was just getting out of school. I pull out of the parking lot behind 2 buses with another bus behind me. Somehow the cop thinks I was going 40 in the 20 but the buses were doing the speed limit. So I get hit with like a $350 ticket that the court refuses to lower because it was in a school zone. TLDR. Stuck between school buses, cop thinks I was speeding. Hit with a huge ticket. My brother and I both had nice cars when we were in high school. The deal with my parents was that if we worked and had good grades, they would buy us each a nice car. My brother had an older Corvette which he took great care of. One night, he and some friends are hanging out at Sonic eating ice cream and shakes and just shooting the crap. They're leaning against the hood of my brother's car and one of the girls spills her peanut butter ice cream explosion mouthgasm, or whatever they sell there, on his car. So they all decide to drive to the car wash about 3 blocks away and wash it off. Little did they know, 2 police officers had been watching them because they assumed that a high school kid with a nice car absolutely must be a drug dealer. My brother did not do drugs. When they get to the car wash, the cops pull in all FBI raid style and handcuff my brother and his friends and then break out the drug dog. The dog commences to lick the peanut butter ice cream which has been clearly spilled on the hood. This causes the 2 officers to get huge cop boners because they classify that as a hit, meaning that drugs are in the car. They proceed to search his car and call my parents, informing them that my brother is going to be arrested for possession of drugs. There was one little problem. They didn't find any motherfucking drugs. My mom and dad jump in their car and haul butt to the car wash, ready to beat the crap out of my brother for being so dang stupid. They arrive and are informed of the situation. My dad immediately begins to attempt to strangle the officer in charge for being such a motherfucking piece of crap imbecile. How my dad didn't get arrested for trying to kick that cop's butt is a mystery to me. The cops finally release my brother and his friends after my mom points out that there is ice cream on the hood and the cops refuse to demonstrate that the dog was signaling for drug possession and not just licking some delicious peanut butter ice cream. Not even an apology was given. TLDR. A police dog's love of peanut butter ice cream leads to my brother being handcuffed and my dad attempts to beat the crap out of an officer. Drug dogs are a load of bulls. So many tests have been done to show how more often than not dogs are influenced into false hits by their handlers. The only real place I could see drug dogs being reasonable, risk of false hits versus risk of not checking at all, would be places like airports when they have them just sniffing luggage and whatnot. Worst case they open someone's bags for no reason. I was waiting outside my friend's dorm building at 2 AM waiting for pizza that we ordered. Pizza guy came, gave me my pizza and I tried to go back in the building but the door was locked and I didn't have a ID that could get me into the building. So I knocked on the glass door to try and get the person attention who was on the phone inside. Then I just got tackled to the ground and someone is yelling calm down. I replied okay, then they put handcuffs on me. I was completely confused because I was drunk and I thought it was a friend who tackled me, not a cop. This cop kept screaming at me to calm down while I was just sitting on the ground not doing anything or saying anything. Then the pizza guy goes over to cop. I saw the whole thing and this isn't justified. He started asking the cop for his badge number so he can report him for tackling and handcuffing me for no reason. Eventually, after they had a yelling battle, the cop let me go, but I lost a pizza. TLDR, cop ruined my pizza. If by justice you mean spending countless hours to break even at no punishment to the guilty parties, then yeah, justice. Good point. Damn it. I have not once, not twice, but 3 times almost been run over by a cop while riding my bicycle. They don't seem to think red lights or stop signs apply to them. And here is a NSFL story. Seriously, don't freaking read this. It is not funny. It's probably not even interesting. And I'm not a good storyteller. But it feels good to get it out of my brain every so often. I was in Guatemala, on the highway heading back to the airport in Guatemala City. There are cops everywhere in Guatemala. Not the kind that pull you over for speeding, but the kind that carry huge automatic weapons that are looking for anyone involved in drug trafficking. Or whatever else, I don't know. Anyway, they would ride 2 cops on a tiny little motorcycle, totally unsafe. While driving our rental truck down the highway that day, one of these pairs of motorcycle cops was weaving through traffic, cut me off, and I almost hit them. My husband nervously half joked, "Oh, don't hit the cops. Haha." Not 10 seconds later, the same idiot police ran into the back of a small pickup 2 vehicles in front of us, spilled off their bike, and were run over by a large, heavy, dump truck type thing. One of them survived, at least as long as we stayed there, as only his legs had been flattened. The other was not so lucky. Watching flattened legs guy crawl desperately towards his obviously very dead partner was the most gut-wrenchingly terrible thing I've ever seen. Then we actually had to get out of our truck and move their bike out of the way so we could leave. No way in heck were we staying there as witnesses. I have no idea how the law works in Guatemala, but I wasn't about to find out. Flattened legs guy. I know this isn't supposed to be funny, but got pulled over in Louisiana. First question out of his mouth is, "Do you have any large amounts of money anywhere in the car?" I said yes. I have $100 in the glove box. This was 1995 and I was a broke college student. That was real money then. He goes in the glove box, pulls the cash out of the envelope that said "Happy Birthday, Love Grandma," and walks off. He then gives me a ticket for excessive acceleration. Mind you, wasn't speeding, wasn't redlining. Takes my license, says "We're keeping it until you pay up. I can escort you to the station." Mind you, I have no license, just a receipt for it he gave me. He does so at 80 miles per hour, where I'm forced to pay up. Turns out, it's perfectly legal to seize any and all cash in a car. The standard is suspicion of drug activity. You do not have to be guilty of anything for them to take all the cash you have. FTP, seriously. My cousin was on a highway entrance ramp when a cop came speeding up behind him. It looked like the cop was going to barrel into him, so he assumed it was an emergency and pulled over to let the cop pass. Said cop immediately pulled him over and ticketed him for reckless driving. My uncle works for the city government and had a friend with access to the highway camera footage. There was a camera with perfect view of the entrance ramp. My cousin and his friend spent a day looking over all the footage to try to find the incident. They did, took it to court, and got the cop suspended. Justice. People forget that local gov state fed cameras are public property and subject to requests for information. Justice 9 months later, combined with countless hours and trips wasted dealing with the situation, is hardly justice. I just fume at things like this, because I've paid countless unfair tickets and dealt with bureaucratic bulls. I have paid a ticket I knew was unjust and wanted to fight, but it would become a game of my word against the police. The cost of the time spent fighting it would be more expensive than paying it. It's a shame that things like this are the case. I was legally parked, and the woman in front of me couldn't get out. She called the police. They came, towed and impounded my car. I paid to get it out, then went to a hearing to fight the tow as illegal. The person who was not a judge but a desk-only type of police officer. I had a copy of the police report from the tow company, who were at a loss to why my car was towed, which stated that my car was legally parked, but that I could not be found and the woman needed to leave for work. I pointed that out to the dong behind the desk, and he said he to talk to the cop to come up with a reason for why the car was towed, and that I would get a letter in the mail. I got a letter saying I was being investigated for a hit and run. They filed false paperwork to cover their own asses, and I lost $500 for the tow and release. WTF. The only way to fight it is to go to the Supreme Court in Oakland on a day that I can't get off from work, so I'm fricked and just give up. Unless you make more than $500 a day at work, I would find it worthwhile for you to pursue this a little bit further. Don't let them get off easy for screwing you. I don't know your situation, but I'm sure most bosses would be fairly lenient if you told him her this story. Once my friend and I were kind of driving around aimlessly, not speeding or anything. She is one of those drivers who always goes the speed limit. All of a sudden this cop car comes up behind us, pulls into the other oncoming lane, drives up beside us, then slams on the brakes. It was hilarious, looked like something from a movie, and pulls us over. So we're kinda like, I wonder what we did. He comes up to the window and all you see is huge gut right in front of us. He tells us we were speeding in a school zone, which we absolutely weren't, so we politely disagreed. Then he said, well, you weren't wearing your seat belts, which, of course, we both had on, for the whole drive. So again, we politely disagreed. He then said, well, okay then, just remember to drive carefully, and he drove off. He didn't argue with us, or issue us a ticket, just drove away. Was very weird. We were living in Hawaii and I had my 4 kids in the car with me. The cops like to set up seatbelt checks and stop everyone and give out tickets for no seatbelts. I stopped for the cop standing in the middle of the road. He looked at me, my daughter in the front seat, my daughter behind me in a booster seat, my infant in the middle of the back seat in a rear-facing car seat. Could barely see my other son sitting on the other side of the car seat. Said he wasn't wearing a seatbelt and to pull over to the side of the road. I looked back, couldn't see anything but the top of my son's head, so I pulled over, got out, checked him. He was wearing his seatbelt, but apparently the cop couldn't see it. By the time the cops had worked their way down the long line of people they were writing tickets for, we had a different cop writing my ticket. I told him my son had been wearing his seatbelt. You just couldn't see it over the baby car seat. He starts being all angry and then asks for my license. My husband was military and the law is that as long as you have a valid military and your state of record license is valid even if it is expired. The cop insisted I was wrong and that he could arrest me right there in front of my children if I didn't take the ticket for not having my son in his seatbelt. I took the ticket, checked the law when I got home, took my ticket to court and got it thrown out. One time I was visiting a friend of mine who lived about an hour from where I live. When I was walking back to where I parked my car, there were 2 police officers in my backseat tearing my car apart for drugs, open alcohol bottles. As I approached and asked why this was happening, their response was, "We got a call that you are here drinking and are planning on driving home drunk." I had not had any sip of alcohol, but officers refused to breathalyze me using "you're destroyed. Just look at you" as their response. Apparently I always look drunk. They didn't find anything incriminating in my car, or so I thought. A young officer walked up to me with a blue rag he found, used to open my oil tank, and said, "Oh, so you're a Crip? Why don't you throw up some freaking gang signs and maybe if you doth them right we'll let you go." I told him he was being ridiculous. I am far from a gang member and he was just trying to set me off. I was told that I had 45 minutes to get a ride home, an hour away at 1 AM, or I'd be arrested. Luckily I got the ride, but my car was towed and a 12-hour hold was put on it. I ended up paying $280 for not drinking or driving, but felt like a total bad butt because the receipt says I was endangering the public. I haven't been back to that town since. TLDR, I got accused of being a gang member and had my car towed for not drinking and not driving. I guess the red rags I have in my toolbox make me a blood thug life. I had all 4 of my car's tires get slashed in my girlfriend's front yard one night a few years back. Chilliwater FL, outside of Orlando. Seminole County Sheriff. Didn't notice it until I tried to drive to class the next morning. Called the cops and they came out and did a report. The cop that came told me to leave it right where it was, on the side of a very rural, very low traffic road. Take the wheels off and bring them to get the tires replaced. That I would be fine leaving it on concrete blocks right there. So, the next day I get my roommate's pickup, drive to my GF's house, put it on blocks and take my wheels to the used tire place like 30 minutes away. I was gone maybe 3 hours total. In that time another cop, who was filling in for the guy from the day before, saw my car on blocks, assumed it was abandoned, and had it impounded. The best part is that, because there were no wheels on it, they broke the concrete blocks out from under it with a sledgehammer, dragged it on its undercarriage like 20 feet and up onto a flatbed. Then they dropped it on its belly in a dirt lot in the middle of Cracktown. Cost me $250 to get it out of impound and it had over $2,500 worth of damage to the steering, suspension, brakes and bodywork. Think anyone cared? Nope. Poor as F college student me got screwed. On the night my college won a sports championship, every house on my street was going absolutely nuts. Thousands of people screaming up and down the street. At about 2 AM, the raging had subsided and me and a few friends were just sitting on the couch, sipping some beer and drinking in the sweet taste of victory when all of a sudden about 3 cops bust through the front door demanding everyone leave immediately. Caught off guard, me and my friends kind of chuckled to ourselves at how ridiculous this cop looks and he sees me and screams, "You're not 21. Get out of here, I'm 22. But seeing as the night was pretty much over I reluctantly comply with the officer's request and leave the house. I walk down to the sidewalk and begin telling a couple friends who happened to be there what had just gone down when all of a sudden the cop storms back out of the house and starts yelling at me to leave again. "Where do you propose I go? My act is on the opposite side of the city and you kicked me out of where I was sleeping," I replied. Then he and 2 other cops proceed to spear me to the ground, smashing my face against the dirt with their elbow, wielding batons to anyone else who dare help me out while I'm getting the absolute crap beat out of me. Then they arrest me and take me to jail. Sweet. TLDR. I must live in North Korea. You could have totally gone to court with a case for abuse, because you had several witnesses that could say you weren't being unruly or whatever. The cops raided my house on accident. They were supposed to raid the house next door. This was when I was a senior in high school, and I was living with my mom, and she had rented a room out to a local college student. Well, that student left a small heart-shaped box that my mom found while cleaning the room after the roomie had left. Well, when the cops were there, they looked in the box, now in my mom's room, and it had a pinky nail-sized piece of psilocybin mushroom in it. So since they spent the tax dollars on the wrong house, they took my mom in for possession. So, my mom was like 47, in jail for almost a week. Oh, they found my bong, but left it for some reason. Really hope that all charges were dropped, and your mom sued the crap out of them. If the warrant was for the house next door, they had no legal right to be in your house, meaning they could have found a dead body in your house, and still would not have the legal right to charge you for the crime. This was posted in a local forum by a construction site manager. It boggles the mind. Ring, ring. Me. Hello? Our city police department. Hi, this is Officer X from the police department. I am calling about the officer you had at your job site for your delivery yesterday. Me. Yes. PD, you didn't pay him enough. You owe us another $40. Me. Officer, I paid him $160, which is a 4-hour rate. Our city has a 4-hour minimum. Although he was only here for a quick 15-minute delivery. I didn't even complain that he was 2 hours late. He was supposed to be here at 12. So, I don't understand. How did I not pay him enough? PD, well, they get time and half after 4 PM. I understand that he was late, but he technically started at 2 PM. So, from 2-4 he gets $80. And from 4-6 another $120. Me. Come again? PD, I know he should have been there at 12, but he was late. It still doesn't change the fact that he started when he did, which is 2 PM. As you know, according to the union rules, we have a 4-hour minimum, so he technically worked till 6 PM. And after 4 PM, they get time and half. Me. Are you listening to yourself? PD, haha, I don't make up the rules. Me, I understand that, but 1. You want me to pay for a 4-hour service, which was only 15 minutes. 2. You also want me to pay time and half for a time the officer had already left. 3. And ignore that the officer should have been there at 12 instead of 2 PM. PD, yes. Me, and you wonder why investors refuse to do business in this city? Why last year, you came close to laying off 80 officers because of budget cuts. PD, I know it sounds ridiculous. My response, I'll let my supervisor know. Thanks for calling. Then hang up and pretend like the call never happened. Fight bureaucracy with bureaucracy. There was a picture set floating around a couple years ago showing a car, in England, I think, that was legally parked on the street. The city changed it to no parking while the couple that owned the car were on vacation. To mark no parking in whatever area this was, they painted a red line along the curb. So they brought in some kind of crane, lifted the car, painted the line, put the car back, then started piling the tickets on the car. I think they came back to £3,000 of tickets from whatever version of the story I read. Very possibly fiction, though. I've seen a cabbie stop at a yellow light, rear. Then the cop behind him wailed on the horn until the cab ran the now red light. The cop then ran the red behind him. No lights on or anything. I half expected the cop to pull the cab over for running the light but didn't. This happened to me in August of 2002 I believe. I was delivering pizzas around 2:30 in the afternoon in a not so good neighborhood. They didn't give us car toppers as it was a robbery magnet in that part of town. I had just completed delivery 2 of 3 and was on my way to the last one. I was in the far right side of a 4-lane road when I see a cop flying up on my left side. Naturally I pull over and wait for him to pass. He pulls in front of my car with his gun drawn and starts going through the felony stop motions. Right as he gets out I look in my rear view and see a train of 7-8 more police vehicles. At this point I realize that crap has gotten real. So, the initial cop is going through the motions and when he finally gets me out of the car he stops giving me orders. I'm assuming at this point that he saw my work uniform and realized the mistake. All the while with his gun still pointed at my head. So I politely ask him what he'd like me to do, and he finishes and gets me cuffed. So I'm standing there watching as a dozen cops tear apart my car. There was absolutely nothing in there besides trash and pizzas. I smoked pot back then but didn't have anything on me. So I'm standing there not saying a word, and I still have no idea why they are arresting me and tossing my car. They then put me in the back of a cage car and start taking my info, and what I'm assuming was a supervisor flings open the back door and tells me that the judge will go a lot easier on me if you try and go to treatment before trial. Admit you have a problem and it'll be better for you, to which I respond, I'm sorry sir, but I have no idea what you're talking about. He doesn't like this answer and starts yelling something incoherent. So they start driving and I ask where we are going. They say to jail. Oh good. I'm held for 24 hours and finally released with a first-degree misdemeanor for soliciting drug sales. For attempting to purchase a 20-piece of crack C from an undercover officer. A drug that even to this day, I've never even seen, let alone done. Got a lawyer who insisted he'd get me off and we'd even get some damages from a civil trial. Never happened. Got plead out and had to do an intervention program. And the charges were essentially dropped. TLDR. Pulled over while delivering pizzas for supposedly trying to buy crack. I wasn't. Arrested and charged with misdemeanor. Fricked by lawyer on top of it. I changed lanes in front of an undercover cop car. There was plenty of room, but dude proceeds to speed up and ride my butt. I sped up to change lanes and let him pass, but he continued following me till he pulled me over. I do admit I should have maintained speed rather than given to his intimidation. Dude gave me 3 tickets and was a total prick, even when I was trying to be nice and cooperative. I found out today he was busted by his own department for DUI on duty last week. Thank you universe. Dunno if it'd be worth it, but you could talk to a lawyer. If he was drinking on duty it may cast some doubt on some of his previous closed cases. You may have the ability to appeal those tickets and have them reversed. I'm a little late to the party, but here's my story. When I was 12 or 13, my two friends and I would basically spend our entire summers staying up all night playing video games, like everyone else I imagine. Well, one night we're complaining about how my mom didn't buy any snack food for us, FWP, and it dawned on us we could walk to the store. Sure, it was a few miles away, but it would rule. We could buy whatever we wanted and no one could stop us. So we embark on our adventure with all of $15, excited as frick. We spend the whole walk talking about how awesome the food is going to be. It took us at least an hour to get to the store, but it was more than worth it. We choose donuts and some Swedish fish, snack food of the gods. It's around 3 AM. As we start walking home with our food, we see a police car drive by us. It passes us. I think to myself, it's so nice to live on a nice side of town where police keep us safe. Flash of lights. The police car skids to a stop and then drives backwards until he's right next to us. He steps out of the car and asks us where we're going. Oh, we're just going home, sir. We just decided to walk too. How old are you? Sorry, 12. You're far too young to be here. It's nighttime. Do you know what kind of people are out after nighttime? Us and them. Cops and robbers. I'm a cop. Who are you? Are you a cop? I suppose this was a rhetorical question, but when I answered no, he said I didn't think so, get in the car. He then proceeds to drive us all back to my parents' house, wakes them up, and explains that we were out walking around up to no good. My parents told him that nothing is wrong with a couple of kids walking to the store to buy some food and that they were irritated that they woke him up. He then proceeded to tell my parents that he needed to do a better job raising their son. And that's when my dad just shut the door in his face. That's the day I realized that my parents were awesome. One night in college, me and some friends are pulling an all-nighter studying and we decide to go to Wendy's at like 3 AM for a Frosty and 99-cent nuggets. You know, because we're poor, we don't have a big enough vehicle for everyone to go together, so we have two drivers. I'm with Mike and his 88 Nissan, or the close equivalent, and a couple other friends are with Matt in his 00, brand new, red Mustang. We go to Wendy's and eat our Frosties and are on our way back. The streets are deserted, no pun intended, and we come up to a red light where two lanes go straight and both cars are stopped side by side. Mike revs the tiny 4-cylinder engine in his crappy Nissan as a joke. Matt revs his V8 beast back and we all have a good laugh. The light turns green and we all drive off at a normal pace. Blue lights ensue. Can you guess what happened? If you guessed that my friend in the Mustang got arrested for drag racing, then you guessed right. And no, not a ticket. Straight up arrested. He tried to get it dismissed, but no luck. It's a serious crime too, and he now has to put on job applications that he was arrested before. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.